Hello, welcome to New Hampshire Hostas. It's the first week in September, and today we're going to be discussing how late in the fall can I plant my hostas. We get that question all the time. Fall is a great time to plant, but obviously it varies first with where you are. Are you in Mississippi or are you in Juneau? And we ship to all those places across the continental United States, plus Alaska. And what's the weather like that fall? Every fall is different. Here in New Hampshire, our first frost can vary by as much as 6 weeks, and that's a big variable. But I'm going to discuss the pros and cons and some things you can do to ensure that your hostas take if you do in the fall, if you do plant in the fall. So first I want to tell you 3 advantages to planting in the fall. The first one is that if you get it in early, the soil temperatures in the fall are very warm. They've had all summer to absorb the solar energy, and it's warm soil that makes root growth. Warm, moist soil, not warm, dry soil, warm, moist soil. So that's the first advantage, and that's why it's a good time if you get it in soon enough. And we'll discuss a little bit more about what's soon enough for you. The second one is if you get it planted in the fall, a hosta planted in the fall will always be ahead of the same hosta planted the following spring. The reason is that it's got an established root system. It's going about its business of pulling up moisture and nutrients, and it's storing more food, and it's ready to go in the spring. When you plant in the spring, the soil temperatures are cold. The sun has not heated up those soil temperatures, and how well the roots do is all about soil temperature, even more so than about air temperature, although they are obviously related. So planted in the fall, you're going to be ahead of that same hosta planted in the spring. The third benefit of planting in the fall is that it extends your gardening season. If you're an avid gardener and you want to be out there, it's a perfect thing to do. It also helps with your busy schedule of the spring gardening, where you're cleaning up, you're planting your annuals, you might be planting some new trees, whatever. If you've already planted your hostas in the fall, that reduces your workload in the spring. But that's obviously up to the individual. So what are some of the cautions, and what are the things that you need to do to make sure that you're successful and that they don't winter kill on you? First off, it can be very dry in the fall, and so make sure that you wet your soil before you start. Do the normal things of taking the rocks out, take the roots out, throw them away, and add your compost that we talk about in most of our videos to increase the organic matter, just as you would at any time of year. You're not doing anything different except the time of year that you're planting. But you have to make sure that soil is moist, and it stays moist up until the ground freezes, wherever you are, until it freezes solid and the water can't penetrate the ground anymore. I'm not saying to make it muddy or keep it muddy, but it needs to be moist. The second caution I'm going to warn you about is avoiding frost heaving. If you don't know what frost heaving is, Google it, look it up. It's just an action created. You may have seen it in your yard when you come out in the spring and the rocks are suddenly in the spring are up on the top that used to be down below. That is frost heaving. It's just a natural occurrence of freezing and thawing. The difference between the density of ice and water, it just pushes plants up to the top that aren't anchored or well rooted, and just as it does push rocks up to the top. So how do you avoid frost heaving? There's a couple of things you're going to do. One is when you take the pot out of the soil, out of your container, you're going to loosen those bottom roots and splay them out a little bit and put those down in your hole at the proper depth, and make sure that you pack it good. Even without additional root growth, those roots can act as the anchor that will eventually prevent the pot or your hosta from heaving up, becoming exposed to the cold winter temperatures, and dying from winter kill. The second thing you can do to prevent frost heaving is put a light mulch on. By light, I mean 1 to 2 inches, which is all you should ever be putting on perennials. Annuals get 1 inch, perennials get 1 to 2, shrubs get 3, and a big tree could get up to 4, no more. And that's the general rule of thumb, no matter what mulch you're using. That mulch will keep the heat into the soil and trap that temperature that we were talking about that has accumulated all summer long. And that's what's going to allow the longest advantage of the longest period, which is what you want, of rooting into the soil to encourage root growth. Keep those temperatures up, avoid the frost heaving, and you should be good to go. Your plants should survive the winter. Just one more thing I'll say is that we stopped selling plugs the middle of September. You should avoid putting in small plants because they heave easier than a large plant. September, October, depending on where you are, is an ideal month to lift your plants and divide them. And so it only follows that, depending on where you live, September and October are perfect months to add hostas to your garden, as long as you use a few rules that we've talked about and do it safely. And just one more thing before I go, I want to show you this praying hands that we used in a video earlier this year. And this is what it looks like in the last week of September. I really think it's a great accent for any garden, any doorway, patio, whatever. I just love it. But it's a hosta that, as we talked about in a previous video, looks great in a container, not so great in a garden. So I hope this helped you out. I hope it answers your questions. And I want to thank you for watching and listening, and happy gardening.